what is grief and how does it affect me? So, we talked a little bit about grief and what I'm going to try and do with it. Now I'm going to explain to you what it is. So, grief is the natural, intense emotional, and physical reaction to loss, most commonly the death of a loved one, but also encompassing major life changes. It is deeply personal, internal experience characterized by sadness, yearning, and confusion, distinct from the outward expression of mourning. So that's the basic definition of grief. So, why do we grieve? There are many reasons why we grieve. One of them is the body's way to a highly stressful event, such as loss of a loved one or significant life changing event. But it's also a way that we show our emotions of prolonged sadness. Often, it's a way to eventually grow from an unpleasant experience. So, that's usually why it's your body's coping mechanism that takes over during one of these events so that you could help assess it. So there's 5 stages mostly: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So denial is usually, this can't be happening, this isn't real. Anger, resentment, frustration, why did this happen? Who did this? Who's responsible? Bargaining, a way to regain control of the situation. I'll do anything, please. Just let me have one more chance, kind of thing. Depression, it's where it sets in. It's like, oh, I guess this is my life now. Why bother? And acceptance. It's actually coming to terms. And that doesn't mean like forgetting or moving on. It means learning to cope and adapt to life with the loss or the diagnosis or the situation. So you're not forgetting, you're learning how to adapt to your life in everyday situations. Now, these can happen in any order. It doesn't have to be like this. You could go from denial to bargaining to anger, depression, acceptance. A lot of people hang on to anger. It's hopefully I could explain that in another video. I'll go into more in depth about these stages of grief here, probably later on. But the anger one does seem to be the big one where people hang on to. But again, these are the 5 stages. It doesn't have to be in order. And it could take time. It's not a quick fix. It's something that can take a long period of time to finally learn to adapt to the new everyday kind of life that you're having. So there's many different types of grief. This is some of them. Disenfranchised grief is not one that is normally announced. So like death of a pet, a diagnosis with a chronic illness. Those ones, the ones that have a lot of stigma or something attached to it. Suicide, AIDS, things like that don't get talked about because they're kind of taboo. There's complicated grief that could last longer than 12 months and that impairs your ability to function. So this one is like infinite sadness that you can't get out of bed, you can't function, it's prolonged, it's complicated, like it's hard to explain. There's anticipatory grief, and that is grief that happens before an event, kind of So you're going to the doctors and you're already grieving what a diagnosis could be because it was suggested to you. So you looked up the symptoms and you're like, oh, okay, this is what's to come. So you start grieving for those things to come. Normal grief, which is the most common, usually leads to acceptance and integration into everyday life. Again, that's not forgetting or moving on. That is accepting and living life with that acceptance. Absent grief, where there's no emotions or grievances. It's usually a coping mechanism or absolutely total denial. That didn't happen sort of attitude. Now, with that, certain generations, men don't cry, suck it up. I need you to be strong. You hear those phrases and words, and it kind of causes this absent grief, and it's generational. It just goes on from one generation to the next, and no one learns to talk about their feelings or emotions. So we have to try and break that absent grief however we can. Secondary grief. So it's a grief that follows after a first episode of grief. So you got a health diagnosis of something that you grieve, and then you find out because of this diagnosis you lost your job. So that's a second grief, but of the same magnitude. And there's no one there to fix like which order you got to fix it, the first or the second one. It's however you prioritize it. It's however patients and clients how they want to do it, because it's all with permission. It's all client led. So there's other types of grief. There is uncomplicated grief or decomplicated grief. And that's one that's usually fairly quick and simple, doesn't have too many parts to it. It's just straightforward. Here's why I'm grieving, and here's how I kind of hope to move on from it. So I've been asking a lot of people on different forums, if they have any questions to me or they want questions to be asked. So one of them was, I didn't have anyone die, so how can I use this, or how can I need this? So even though they didn't have the passing of a loved one, having a diagnosis of a terminal illness, condition, and or injury could still have a grieving effect on you and or your loved ones. Loss of use of an arm, you have to accept and adapt to not having that, which brings a very strong emotion. You had an ABI or a TBI, this could seriously affect many parts of your life and your family structure. You might need to learn how to walk again, talk again, eat on your own, etc. This will undoubtedly bring strong emotions to show up again from you and your loved ones. So this just isn't about you. It's about everybody, your care team. Who's going to be there? They will need help as well. They could use help either as individuals or as a group, or both together. Never hurts families to have it together, so they all get on kind of the same page and understand how everybody's feeling about the situation, and kind of not what to expect, but to kind of understand one another. So that's why I'm kind of pushing for this, because there's such a lack of this type of help out there that no one seems to understand about it. That this is a missing part of the healing process. It's a lot of it's physical. Like the symptoms are physical, the pain is physical. Sometimes it's mental. But there's emotions, there's feelings, there's everything. It's how can you heal the body without healing the mind and the emotions is kind of how I'm looking at this. And through a family dynamic, it really helps the family dynamics that they have times to understand it. So, conclusion, I've briefly talked about grief, the stages of grief, and how there are many ways that grief can happen and occur. I also answered some basic questions that I've been asked since I began to spread the awareness to this lacking healing process and opportunity. Next time, we'll talk about some simple things you could do at home that could help yourself to at least get some of those questions, thoughts, feelings, whatever you have out in the air and to clear your mind. And that's it. There's some real basic things that you could do at home. Maybe you're already doing some of them. Just don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the number one thing that you could do. Ask for help. Don't be afraid to. Thank you, everyone.